I don't know what guidance to give you. That is to say, I don't have a strong opinion one way or the other. But I do have some questions that I don't necessarily need an answer to, but that I'd like you to consider as you deliberate this topic. Democracy is a messy business, and it's priceless, and it's expensive. And one of the things we keep hearing over and over again is that this small governance is getting in the way of efficiency. And that may be true. But it also is an incubator of citizen-based democracy. I teach math, so I'm not supposed to be concerned with that, I guess. But I am also actually a citizen concerned about our democracy. So if it's not the responsibility of the community's learning centers to provide the opportunities for this education, I understand the burden of a superintendent with multiple boards to deal with. And I honestly don't know how any of the superintendents that I've seen work in the Rutland-Windsor Supervisory Union, I don't know how they raise families. I don't know how they know who their spouses are, let alone their kids. And that's a problem that needs a resolution. And so this looks like a really attractive thing to somebody in that position, but I'm not sure that that's necessarily the only possible answer. The other question, I don't know how to put it, so I will say that my kids are really worth spending my tax dollars on. And whether I say my kids as in the two boys that I raised, or the kids that live across the street from me, or even on the other side of town that go to the same church that I go to. Now, the kids that live in Rutland, I think it's really important that they get a good education. On the other hand, money's tight. Somebody ought to be willing to pay for that. The truth is that Vermont's public schools are, and we have the data to support that, they're among the best schools in the country. What we're messing with is something that works very well. And I'm not saying we shouldn't mess with it. I just think we should tread very carefully. There's a lot of reasons why they're very good schools. And what's close to home is most important. And I believe that because this decision-making is close to home, that's a reality. Also, one last thing. The schools, and this has been mentioned before in slightly different ways, the public schools in Vermont are under a lot of pressures to change. And I like that. Some of that change has been a long time coming, and it's like a breath of fresh air. We are much more accountable than we were, and that's a good thing. However, too much change, too many new initiatives, too often hurts the schools. It really does. When you have too often a turnover in administrations, when you have too often a shift in what the direction, where's the energy, abandoning stuff that's been, an awful lot of effort has been put into because now we have this next new thing. And this additional change is going to shift the ground again. And I'm not saying we shouldn't do it, but understand that nothing's for nothing. So I think that there's an awful lot coming down the pike. I know everybody loves to hate No Child Left Behind, but that was just the latest renaming of an act that's been around since the 60s. And a lot of good has come from it. And I appreciate that they're going to change a lot of the flaws in it. But it's not that it's not going to have any impact in schools. There's a new Common Core, which is, it looks from my vantage point like an attempt to nationalize the curriculum. I don't know what it will end up being, but I know that it will be yet another new stressor on the system. So, what you're talking about doing is adding even another new stressor on a system. And the system, right now, is expensive. But it works really well. So, I don't have any answers for you. But I'd just like you to consider those things as you do your work. And I really appreciate you coming down to Springfield. Thank you very much.
I'd like to echo a few thoughts that came up during our meeting with the Commissioner, as well as some of the concerns about people in our district. Number one, I applaud your inclusion and understanding that school choice is incredibly important to most folks in Vermont, particularly in small towns. That is just an incredibly highly held value for everybody in small towns. And I think there's a lot of provisions there to maintain school choice, at least in the short term, and it's not clear how that would fall out in the long term, and I think that those are concerns for people. We all know that Vermont is incredibly unique. It's why most of us live here. We have incredibly unique towns and school districts. We have concerns that consolidation is more of a cookie-cutter approach to governance and to education, and that all districts and schools don't need to look alike, nor should they look alike. There's a lot of value and uniqueness. The small schools in Vermont are the lifeblood of our small towns, and even though there is a provision for small schools to remain open, at least in the short term, I believe that your current proposal would be the demise of small schools in Vermont. And I have concerns about that, and West Windsor citizens have concerns about that as well. We would like to see some financial analysis of this consolidation plan, though there are tax incentives for our townspeople and taxpayers. There's no overall financial analysis of how this will save the state of Vermont money in the long run, and it would be helpful to see that information. In the last year, our supervisory union has made incredible changes. We were, I believe, the only district in Vermont that had 4 superintendents in our supervisory union. So in a sense, we have consolidated in the last year. We came together, we hired a single superintendent. We have a very strong supervisory union board with representatives from all of our towns. And so in that way, we have expanded our view of our community. But we've started in a small way, and we are being successful in that way. I would ask you to start small so that we can continue to move on some of the mandates and requests from Governor Douglas and from the Commissioner. We've all done what has been asked of us in terms of our budgets this year. We've shown that we are responsive. So please continue to help us do the work that we're already doing. Thank you.
In the 1980s and 90s, I did research on school finance at Syracuse University's Maxwell School. And we did it for New York State, Nebraska, and a little bit for Wisconsin. And I learned over and over again that doing research in school finance and schools and consolidation is brutally hard work. I spent more hours than I could think about in front of key punches computers running data. And you cannot make good policy without good data. And one of the problems we have in Vermont is we don't have very good data. We have very little data. And to rush any education bill through without a better understanding of how the current system works, without better data analysis, to me is foolhardy. I sent the Commissioner a whole bunch of questions that I would like answered in this process, and he wrote back very kindly and said, we don't have the data to answer your questions. And I think before we walk down this road, we need to find ways of doing better policy analysis in the state of Vermont and building up the policy analysis apparatus in state government. These are very difficult choices we're going to face. This fiscal mess we're in is going to last for a long time. Fiscal demand far exceeds fiscal capacity. We all know this. We're a graying state. We may be like Ireland and only exporting our kids. We've got to rethink this, and you're only going to be able to do it with better policy analysis and better data.